Good evening, everyone, all our friends. Thank you for coming tonight. It's a great joy to come together. We're going to share a couple of passages from the Gita, then we'll talk about those and just have a pleasant sharing. I think this kind of thing has been going on in India for thousands of years, where people gather together and read a little bit of the Gita and talk about the meaning of it. It's a very beautiful, beautiful tradition. We had a dear friend who passed away some time ago. He was the son-in-law of Master's closest boyhood friend. His wife was the daughter of Tulsi Bose, for those of you who read the autobiography. And one morning we went in. He was staying with us at the ashram in Gurgaon. We went in one morning because Swamiji had asked us to call him up to have breakfast with him. His name was Devi Mukherjee. And so we knocked on the door and went into the little guest room where he was staying. And he was seated there, cross-legged, with his little Brahmin thread, reading the Gita. And it just seemed like something that was ancient from time immemorial, where people read the Gita, tried to understand these beautiful teachings, and connected with God, connected with truth. And so let's share a little tonight. We'll read two passages from the Gita, and this is from chapter 4. And among other things, Krishna is talking with Arjuna about the meaning of Yagya and explaining that. And so this is stanza 33 and 34, and I'll read them both. And then I'll speak on the first one, and Davidji will speak on the second one. The inner spiritual fire ceremony of raising awareness is superior, O scorcher of foes, meaning Arjuna, to any outward act of self-offering. In this wisdom alone is all action or karma consumed. And stanza 34. Understand this above all, by surrender of self-will to the wise, by sensitive inward and outward questioning of the wise, and by service to the wise. Those who have realized the truth will be able to convey their wisdom to you. Beautiful passages. Every passage is beautiful, so no sense to compare. So I'll talk a little bit about inner offering and inner yagya. Now, one of the very fundamental aspects of life and fundamental aspects of the spiritual path is self-offering, because without that, we can't get rid of our delusion. See, what do we really offer to the divine? We can't offer him any wealth. He is the wealth. We can't offer him our possessions. He is the possessions. But we can offer him our delusion that we possess our possessions. We can offer him the delusion that wealth is ours and that it leads to our happiness. And so really all we can offer him is our delusion. That is the ego. The one definition that Swamiji used of a definition for the ego is a bundle of self-definitions. And so what we offer to God is, and we hold on to that, each of those little, I think of them like arrows in a quiver, or we hold on to each little arrow as if it's so precious, and all it is a misunderstanding, a delusion that we apply to ourselves, of self-definition. Ultimately, really the only thing we have to offer God is our love. Master said God has everything else, but what he doesn't have is your love. And that has to be given voluntarily. And so an outward yagya is a symbol of this process. The real yagya, especially I'll say for those of you who have had initiation into Kriya, will understand that in Kriya we try to offer our life force to especially the light that we see at the forehead. So that offering of self into the fire of light is the true yagya that Krishna is talking about here. The first yagya that I ever was exposed to, you all grew up with the term and with the understanding of yagya, but in America, this was a very esoteric and odd practice. The first time, and the first ones we ever had, was at our meditation retreat, which was the first property that we had for Ananda. And Swami would go there. I would often drive up with him from San Francisco, and we would go, and he would give the weekend classes. And on Sunday morning, it was wonderful. He was young and vital, and it was so much joy and happiness in those days. Well, there still is. Shouldn't refer to then. But that was the initiation of it. And it was very primitive. We didn't have any buildings. And it was very much like the retreat out here. We had to travel a long, bumpy road. I don't know why God always gives us long, bumpy roads. Something in our group karma. But that retreat was the initiation spot for so many of us into these truths. And this retreat, that the ashram that we're forming now, will blossom into, we're so impressed and supportive of what's happening there. And that will blossom into the spot where so many hundreds and thousands of people will come and receive kind of their initiation into these teachings. And especially a longer period. We have a satsang here that is very short, but when you have a weekend or a week or a month, then you can get much deeper. And so we're very, very happy to see the retreat coming up as it is, and see the temple being built. The first buildings we were building at Ananda retreat in California were temples. So it's all just like a pattern repeating itself. But coming back to Yagya, so we would have weekend programs, and we had very primitive accommodations. Mostly we just had tents. And so on Sunday morning, Saturday morning also, Swami would come around. He had a guitar, and he would come around early in the morning singing bhajans. And so he would be strumming his guitar, and then he got me to follow behind playing the mridanga. And so I would be beating on the mridanga, and he would be singing. We would both be singing. And then as we would wake up people, then they would join us in a procession, and we would go around the retreat, and everybody would get up and wake up. Then we would meditate together. And then he always started with a yagya, a fire ceremony. And so we had a big fire pit, half as big as this room. And we had logs around so people could sit on the logs. And Swami would sit by the fire, and he offered two things, which we still do to this day. He would chant, and we would chant with him, first the Gayatri mantra, and he would offer ghee. And he would explain to us that the offering of that ghee was symbolic. It was only an outward symbol, but it was symbolic of the offering up of the feelings of the heart. And because ghee is purified butter, it was the purified feelings of the heart that were being offered. Now, for us in meditation, those purified feelings of the heart, devotion especially, when offered up into the fire of the light at the forehead, the kutastha, is the inward fire ceremony. And so the offering of that ghee along with the Gayatri mantra, and then he would pass around a basket, and we'd all have handfuls of rice. And then he would chant the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, and we all learned it and would chant together. And then we'd all toss rice into the fire. And he explained that the throwing of rice into the fire was symbolic of offering the seeds of our karma. Because those two things especially, the unpure feelings or attachments, the likes and dislikes that reside in the heart, in the Anahat chakra, are the primary things, that and the karma, which is simply actions that took place, thoughts, actions, desires that took place under the influence of delusion in the past. And so we're offering that up into the fire, so we'd all joyfully throw this rice in and everybody would have a good time. But gradually, Swami was so much just like a father or an elder brother. He didn't want or let any distance. We, of course, had great respect for him, but he did not want to be viewed as someone distant, as someone apart. So he always treated us, his first name for a monastery was the Friends of God. And so he treated us as divine friends, as we probably thought of ourselves more as divine children, as Chela. But from his part, he just wanted that friendship and that love, because that is the true expression of God. See, if he had, as the teacher, held himself at a distance, what would be the result? We would think, well, he's the teacher, he's at a distance, he represents the channel of God. So if he's at a distance, well, then God must be even farther away. And he didn't want that. He wanted to be like our dearest friend, our most supportive person. And that made us understand on a subconscious level that God, if our teacher can be inside our heart and always supportive, what must God be? Even more so. And so he would teach through his example. And it was so close and so dear. But this understanding of the deeper aspect of Yagya, he gradually taught us more and more. And then he would give us the teachings of meditation, of energization, Huang Sa, Om technique, and then Kriya, so that we could understand more and more inwardly what the Yagya truly is, which is nothing outside, no symbol outside can be as deep as what goes on inside in our own consciousness. And so in deep, deep self-offering, we would try to offer ourselves into the light of God. For those of you who have had Kriya, this is the practice of Kriya, that we offer the life force into the spiritual eye, and we try to control that life force, and then we, through that practice, we withdraw the outward movement of life force. Master said that we're always seeking fulfillment. When we're in a physical body, we seek that fulfillment through the body and through the senses. And so on a physical level, we have to have a yagya that has some sort of physical substance to it. And we offer up in an arati, you offer up the various senses to God. And so when we're in a physical plane, that's what we're offering up, is the body and the senses, our attachment to it. On an astral plane, he said that we're seeking fulfillment through vibration, not through the physical form, but through vibration. And on a causal level, we're seeking it only through consciousness. And it's easy to see that it's only God's consciousness that's creating everything. So after the satsang, we'll have some prasad, and we'll enjoy that with the physical body and with the senses. We'll taste it, we'll smell it, it'll feel good, it will taste good. But if we're sensitive, we'll eat that on an astral level also, and we'll feel the vibrations in it. Oh, this was cooked with so much love. This was cooked with kindness. It's offered with kindness. And so we'll feel those vibrations as a part of what we're getting. And then if we were on the causal level, we would say, oh, this food doesn't really exist. It's only made up of God's consciousness. And so it's God's consciousness in the form of this body, taking in God's consciousness in the form of this food, and it would all be one. But because we're on the physical level, before we take the food, we offer that food to God so that it becomes prasad. Because, as it says in the scriptures, if you eat unoffered food, you're eating sin. What that means is that if you don't offer back to God, you're ignorant. And if you take that for yourself, you're eating of ignorance. And so all of this beautiful self-offering, we think that we're offering, but all it is God with deep friendship and deep love reaching out to take from us the burdens that we carry, the delusion that we have, and that reaching out is done with deep love and deep friendship. And this is such a beautiful teaching and beautiful path.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, nice to see so many of you here. So I'll talk about the second passage that Jyotish read, which really is, I would say, the essence of discipleship. He talked in the passage, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, how to offer yourself to the wise, to the guru. And first he says, surrender your self-will. And this is the activities, the energy of our will, of our physical energy. And you know, when Swamiji first knelt at Master's feet on that very significant day in September 12th, 1948, when he knelt there, after a bit of discussion, Master asked him, do you give me your unconditional love? And Swami said, oh, yes. And he said, do you give me your unconditional obedience, your will? And Swamiji wanted with every fiber of his being to be accepted in discipleship with Master, but he had to be honest, and he said, sir, what if I ever think that you're wrong? And Master answered him very wisely, knowing Swamiji's the way to win this disciple. He said, I will never ask anything of you that God himself does not ask me to ask you. And Swamiji said, in that case, I give you my unconditional obedience. So, but to get to that point where you recognize the wise, that you recognize that we need to surrender the self-will, it's the first step, that we are guided by negative energy, we are guided by our egoic desires until we accept the guidance of the Guru. And only then can we begin realizing, I will follow this one, because I know they have wisdom greater than our own. And so often in our life with Swamiji, he would do things we didn't understand. He would ask of us things we didn't really understand where he was going. he would perhaps honor people that didn't seem to be worthy of being honored. But because we knew he had wisdom, we didn't argue. We just surrendered our self-will. And then he was able to take that energy that goes into the egoic resistance and says, but I know better, my way is right, he doesn't understand. And when we can surrender that, then the Guru can use our will and channel it through the practice of Kriya, through attunement, so that our will becomes guided by divine will. And when that happens, we are treading a sure path to God. It also says next to surrender the first one was surrender the will. The second is to ask questions sensitively of the wise. This is an interesting thought. What does it mean to ask questions sensitively of the divine? Because you've probably been in satsangs where there's someone who is showing off their understanding. They've read a spiritual book and someone's humbly giving a discourse, and the person says, yes, but in the Srimad Bhagavatam it says this and that, and challenging the speaker. That's not sensitively asking questions. Once Swami tells the story in the New Path of a man that came to Master who was a well-respected spiritual teacher in his own right, but not on Master's caliber at all. And he began asking Master these questions that were rather pompous. And Master so he listed this whole list, he read off this list of questions, and Master said very quietly, love God. And the man kind of brushed that aside and kept asking these questions. And the Master said, with a little more force, after another series of questions, love God. And the man, thinking that Yogananda hadn't understood the depth and subtlety of his teachings, continued with these pompous intellectual questions. Finally, Master stood up and with great force said, love God, and just got up and left the room. And the man later told people, oh, this Yogananda, he didn't understand the questions I asked him. But what Master was saying was, you aren't asking questions, you're just showing off your own knowledge. And if you really want to understand these things, love God, and that then you will understand, it will be given unto you. And so, but to sensitively ask questions of the divine, just as Jyotish was saying, to think of the wise, the Guru, any form of God that's dear, to hold them close and not think of them far away, and to feel confident that you can ask the questions, the sincere questions in your heart, without thinking that you will be judged, that you are foolish, that what a silly question that is to ask. But to have the confidence. You know, it says often in the Gita, Krishna calls Arjuna, O you of the uncarping spirit. You who isn't always saying, oh, what about this and what about that, but who just accepts humbly the wisdom that the divine gives to us. And so to sensitively ask questions, to see God as our very dearest one, and to say, you know the questions in my heart, you know the longing in my heart, guide me, answer my questions, enlighten me, so that with heart and mind fixed on God, I can grow spiritually. And then finally, it says in this passage to offer service to the wise. And what does that mean, to offer service? We come to the ashram, the center here, or at the ashram out by Watunde, and we see wonderful service happening, just people doing active and busy and serving God. But the deepest kind of service is the moment by moment offering of our thoughts and our heart's feelings to God. Swami Kriyananda, as you know, wrote many books, 150 books, composed a great deal of music, 400 pieces of music. But he said to us once, I never wrote one word or put down one musical note that I didn't feel sincerely in my heart. And what does that mean? It means that every word he wrote in those 150 books, every note that he put down in all the pieces of music he wrote, came as service to his guru, sincerely from his heart. He wasn't just writing music or publishing books. Every word, every note was an act of service. And so as we serve, some of you, most of you here have jobs in the world that you have to fulfill. It can be an act of service. Don't think that it's not. If you separate our friend Vijay is a retired pilot, and airplane pilot, and to be able to concentrate on all the different things on the panel of the airplane, the mind has to be focused and calm. I'm sure. I've never flown a plane, but I would imagine that's true. But whatever we're doing, there's no area of our life there in which we can't, with a calm mind, be saying, Lord, I am doing this for you. And ultimately, the highest form of service is meditation and devotion, where we sit quietly, absorbed in the self, and offer each thought to the Guru, each breath to the Guru. This is the highest and purest form of service. And when we can do all these things, when we can surrender our will, when we can sensitively question the Guru about how to proceed spiritually, and when we can offer moment by moment our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions to the world around us, then Krishna says to Arjuna, then the wise can impart to us their wisdom. And so it's through these ways that we become receptive, that we break down the barriers of heart and mind and physical energy, and then the wise, the guru, preceptor, can impart to us their wisdom. And when that happens, then we find the fulfillment of all of our life's experiences. So it is not so complicated. As Master said to the pompous questioner, love God. And all these things come unasked for. They come effortlessly. As the Master's beautiful chant, all the doors do open themselves. All the lights do light themselves.